Yeah, Martin, this is great. Huh? I think the last question is the most easy to answer, but it's very nice because I can now talk about metaphysics in a moment. So thank you for that opportunity. And for the ethicist on board, I'm very sorry, but he posed the question. So what is the problem with current biomimetic designs? I'm from the Netherlands, and we are famous in swimming. So what is biomimetic design? We take the skin of a shark and we look at the molecular level of the skin of the shark and the aerodynamics or the dynamics of the shape, and we mimic that in a shark-like swim or skate suit. And that gives us an advantage at the future Olympics, and we again in these sports will have the golden medal. But even if the shark skin is mimicked, it is just an imitation. The swimsuit itself is not regenerative. So for instance, if the shark dies, then the skin will be regenerative. It will be part of the cycle of nature, while the swimsuit can just be synthetic. So if we limit ourselves to, or if we take inspiration from singularities, so individual natural organisms like the gecko or the shark, then there is a huge risk that we just imitate a form or a function, which is then not necessarily intrinsically sustainable or regenerative. So that is the reason why I am more interested in principles than in... and then, of course, the question is, yeah, what the hell? Nature runs on sunlight. Is that not a ridiculous principle of nature? And that brings then to the metaphysics. So the biologists like Janine Benyus and all these people from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that is really in this area, they talk about principles like waste, building on diversity and that kind of things. While I think that we have to also, accompanying this more anthropological question, to raise the metaphysical question, what is in fact then the materiality of nature that in a way enables natural entities to emerge? Is there something like life, and how do we define it, and can we take this as an example? And why this example? We can also become a social Darwinist and then think about the competition between everything. I tend to be inspired by this notion of life as it is, for instance, developed by Capra and these systems thinkers, because you can say that in a way, materiality of material entities have the tendency to become an identity, become a self, and that holds for you. And you don't want to die, but also in a way you could say if you allow me to have a little bit open discussion about materiality, you can also say that the table also has the tendency to stick together. Why is it the case that the table doesn't fall apart? There is a tendency to stick together. So that is one principle that you can say that you can find that constitutes an entity. And at the same time, you can also say that entities have the tendency to be responsive. Your identity is not only constituted by your own will to survive, or and that is in what Spinoza calls conativity, but also by your tendency to be responsive to others, for instance, in our talk. And this responsiveness also constitutes you as your identity. And you can also say that also in case of the table receives its meaning not only from its own sticking together in a way, but also by being responsive to you as the one who is sitting at the table, writing on it, all that kind of things. If the table would be this high, it wouldn't be a table for you. So in a way, you can say that material entities have the tendency to form ecosystems, and that's not limited to only the living entities, I would argue, but it also holds for material entities. And this is the type of principles that I'm looking at. You can also look at it, you can translate what I just said easily in terms of thermodynamics, for instance, and then we have a theory that applies to the whole nature or the whole material environment. So these are the type of principles that I think that we have to consider if we talk about biomimetic technologies. And then the question you had about the methodology, that is what we will discuss if we meet each other in Twente for the workshop on phenomenology, because that is the real tricky part. I can only say a few things about that. But what is the work of a philosopher? If a philosopher tries to make sense of a principle, for instance, then from a phenomenological perspective, you say there is an interrelationality between you and your environment. And in a way, in the engagement in these type of, in my engagement with you or with this ecosystem in which we are living and acting together, we can, on the one hand, can engage in this relation, and at the same time, without stepping out of it, we are no theoretical scientist, no natural scientist in this regard. We don't have an object, but we can step aside at the same time and see what are the do we have accepted already as the structure of reality when engaging with each other. For instance, three-dimensional space, chronological time, all kinds of things that we assume already before we can engage. And this is what a philosopher or what a phenomenologist is doing. Namely, on the one hand, you cannot step out of the relation, but at the same time, it is as if you are. We have a large Dutch community. Als je Poland dwars staan op, Mark. If you dwars staan op een relatie.
Dwars staan.
Sorry.
To be more in opposition to be somehow.
So if we have a relation, you can engage fully in the relation. For instance, if you have a friend, you can love your friend, then you are fully absorbed by your relation. You can also have a sort of theoretical stance by excluding your relation with it, and you can, in a way, in this relation, try to step outside of it without losing the connection. That's I can say more about this, but that is the way that a philosopher or a phenomenologist try to make sense of the reality or the world that he or she is already engaged in. Hope this helps for now. Thank you for your question.
The floor is open for questions from the audience.
My name is Andreas Weber. Thank you so much for that intriguing talk. And I wonder if not the use of the term nature is the elephant in the room here. And I connect this question with a termite mound, which you showed and which you also commented as actually not being a cooling system, a ventilation system. So this goes back to the work of Scott Gilbert, who is deeply into termites. And actually the termite mound is part of the extended organism. So this object of the house of the termites is the termites. That is what he is trying to show. And so there's actually not a real differentiation between agents recreating their aliveness and the mechanical objects which are implied in this. And I think the same is valid for, or this viewpoint should apply to what we think about nature, because nature, if we use it as a term, is always a big object with certain features. And what I would suggest is to deconstruct this term with the help of the termite mound into something much more processual and even perspectival from the perspective of selves trying to reconstitute, to reconstruct themselves. So I would say it is maybe better to say nature is a process of creating identities through transformation. And if we do this, then all these terms you use become a slightly different twist, because we don't have to somehow arrange objects, agents in this process of distributed identity through transformations are always recreating themselves. So this mimetic activity becomes a profound part of that which we before perceived as objects. So that is a little bit the way I'd suggest, yeah. And I'd like to yeah. hear what yeah. you think of it.
So I thank you very, very much for this remark. I will look at this work by Gilbert then, because it's also a fun example that I just used, and I was not aware of this work, to be honest. I think that we are fully on the same page if it comes to nature as object and what I described in my response to Martin as an principles of nature, because indeed the principles nature as running on sunlight takes nature as indeed a sort of big object, deriving then principles from it, while I think that if you look at nature from an ecosystem perspective or the perspective of life as metabolic system, then you see already, you highlight this processual nature of emerging interrelations between objects or agents and their environment. And then indeed, the termite mound is the extension or the extended phenotype, so to speak, of the termite itself. And I think that this is also what I try to indicate in terms like tendency processes of sticking together. That is then in the metaphysical terms, conativity, responsiveness, because then you have this ecosystem type of thinking like a cell or like an organ and like an organism. And these are all kinds of nested systems. At the same time, and that allows me to say one thing, there is, of course, currently a huge popularity of this relational ontologies, in which the identity of an agent is completely derived from its interrelations. Like in posthumanism, for instance, that is really something that is embraced. While at the same time, I am also still a classical philosopher in the sense that I like to raise existential questions about the singularity of human existence, for instance, and that makes me hesitant then to take on this post-humanist perspective completely. So that's my only remark, that I fully agree with what you said about how we have to conceive nature. But at the same time, I hope to leave room for notions like singularity, existence, etc. But that is just a minor detail in the...
I'm Yuri Kinkor, trying to relate what you are saying and what you said about Rousseau and Stigler, related to premises of biocentrism and anthropocentrism. It seems to me that Rousseau was on, it seems to me sure, on the biocentric premise in his ethical approach, as opposed to this Stigler, which, whom I don't know at all, but you yourself said he was opposed, or he's opposed to Rousseau. So it seems to me that Stigler is on the anthropocentric, as opposed to Rousseau, premise. How about you? I'm not sure. You many times said to save the planet, not to disrupt the planet, not to exploit the planet. Are you, or do you see yourself on the biocentric or on the anthropocentric premise? Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm not sure this is just for the people who are interested in Stigler. I'm not sure on the one hand whether he would say that he is an anthropocentrist in this debate. I believe, and that's a little bit critical about him, and that's the problem with all the French philosophers. Sorry, there are some French here. Sorry, not all the French philosophers, but some of my colleagues. But that starts with Levinas, for instance. That is with Lacan, and that's also with Stigler. That in a way in their education, Freud became a sort of major figure. And that's why they have a sort of anthropological, psychological interest. So if Stiegler is talking about interiorization, it's about psychological interiorization. The German philosophers, like Heidegger, they never read Freud, I guess, and they are interested in the world. So if we are talking about being in the world, it's not about being in the psychological world, and that is sometimes the flavor that you get from Stiegler, that this world that he is talking about is it's a psychological world. So that is why I think that he has an anthropological interest mainly, like Levinas, although he had an ontology, he has in an ethical sense, he has an... And I think that, that I am more in this German philosophical tradition of being interested in both the human condition, but the human condition in relation to the world and the earth as biosphere. So that is with regard to the first point. And then the question is, what is my position, whether I'm an anthropocentrist or a biocentrist? I think that this opposition is not valid anymore, precisely because of the previous speaker. There is something like interrelationality. You are not yourself, but you are only in relation to the environment. So there is no room for a pure biocentered position, nor an anthropocentric position, I would say. And maybe one fun argument that's not only fun, why I think that it's a pity if we kill the planet, and that is derived from Clive Hamilton. He says, it would be really a pity, of course, if we die, because there is a vast universe with enormous amounts of planets. And then if we are not there, and if life is not there anymore, then there is no distinction anymore between this planet and all the other planets. So also the planet Earth has an advantage of giving room for life, for us, because it makes also this planet unique in comparison with all the other planets. And maybe that provides a sort of argument why we should save the planet without ending up in a little bit, I don't like this opposition. Yeah, the planet doesn't care. You are only caring for yourself. So if you want to save the planet, you are in the end just an anthropocentrist. I don't buy that argument. I think that is a little bit too easy. And that's why I bring then this fun argument as a potential alternative.
Yeah, one problem with the fun argument is, of course, from which point of view? Is it the point of view of some kind of divine being that sees all the planets, or some kind of superhuman that looks from the cosmos down and so on?
Yeah. No, it is a fun argument, because if there's nobody else, yeah, of course, nobody cares. And that you cannot have like this theoretical natural physicist that was on Zomer. We are not in the Netherlands at the moment. We had a famous Dutch program this summer with a large interview with a Belgian natural theorist. And he talked about biophilia of the universe, the idea that there is something in the universe that appreciates to give rise to life. Now, I don't buy that argument, but that life makes this planet unique in the vast amount of the universe. That is what I give it for your thought.
Thank you, Vincent. Let me quickly insert my own two less fun comments. One is like, where does mimesis stop? Because I found your when you gave the example of the cat, that it is mimesis when I eat something that I kind of imitate the cat. I think that looks like maybe going too far, because I'm just responding to my own needs as a biological being, or I'm just living, basically. So is that still mimesis? So where is the border in general of your mimesis concept? Because it gets very tempting to see everywhere mimesis where maybe there is also not mimesis. The second one, it was when I heard you, we have to take aesthetics as a sort of inspiration. I agree with you, but what kind of aesthetics? Because a lot of your examples were about form, seeing the principle behind the form or the pattern behind the form. That's a particular kind of aesthetics, which is distant. I look at something and so on. And there's also, of course, mimesis of behavior, of indeed transformation, of performance, I would use that word. So, how do you see that? So I agree with you that aesthetics is a great source here, but I would say let's also look at maybe different kind of aesthetics.
Yeah, so great remarks. So the assumption is a little bit, of course, that in a way, if mimesis is the human condition, that you can understand all human behavior as either mimesis or deviation from mimesis. And that brings us to questions about creativity. Is the human creative? Is it really the case that humans invent something completely new to the world? Or is it always the case that every invention is intended as a mimesis, and that can be deviating? It's possible that you don't succeed. With regard to the cat, so where does it stop? In a way, for instance, I'm working at an agricultural university and life science university. You can say that doing agriculture is mimicking the natural process of growing food, while at the same time, in the highly technological or high-tech agriculture that we are working in, it is completely a deviation from this mimesis. But the question is, can we still see it as a deviating mimesis that is then not in line with the natural regenerative design of natural mimesis? And is that sufficient to understand it? But that is... And then, even more important, there is indeed a risk of using the Mona Lisa or Mother Mary at the picture here, because that is indeed as if nature is an object in front of us, while, for instance, if we look at mimicking behavior or music, for instance, that already introduced these things like processes and that kind of things. I fully agree that this is the type of aesthetics or examples that we have to consider as well, but it's also for practical reasons that you're not sure to what extent people are familiar with this topic, that it is also easy to take these type of examples. But you're completely right. So thank you for that. There
was the question there, the last question.
Thank you very much. So I'm Laszlo Kwas from the Institute of Philosophy, and I was very surprised that you took Rousseau as a framework for designing this talk, because if you look at his time, so what did they know about biology? Almost nothing. So it was totally a very elementary, very primitive, very pre-scientific biology. No evolution, no molecular biology, nothing. And what did he know about technology? Only mechanical technology, so no electricity, etc. And now you are living in a very naive world where you can say that nature doesn't produce waste, but oxygen is a waste, of course. So you had these anaerobic bacteria which polluted the planet with oxygen, and they then had to hide into us as mitochondria and into the plants as chloroplasts. So basically, we are the second generation, and if we pollute our planet, then we'll be a third generation of life, where we will be maybe some mitochondria inside of some bigger organism or something like that. So I think this naive biology that nature makes no waste doesn't work. And also with technology. So with electrodynamics, with Maxwell, starts a new era, because in nature you don't have electromagnetic waves. Never. So only maybe a thunder, there is something, but because you have to really create electric current etc. So it's a very complicated thing to make. And so electromagnetic technology, so radio waves, telephone, etc., are not mimicking anything. They are invented by human and mimicking. So technology since Hertz, 1880, is out of the mimicking metaphor. So basically, we are not speaking about modern technology and not speaking about modern biology, but okay, Rousseau is nice and funny.
Yeah. So that is a killing argument. I'm almost dead. But thank you for that, because we are, as philosophers, we're in love with the truth. So if I'm if you're right, then we can. You shouldn't have invited me to talk here. But so give me. I'm always almost lying on the floor. I'm almost dead, but I give it a try. First, philosophers, philosophy is about reflection about theories, and then that's at least how I see philosophy, is using these theories and reflect on them in new context in order to advance the theory itself. So I am, for me, completely legitimized to use Aristotle or Plato or Rousseau as a theoretical framework because he is using the notion of mimesis. That is the reason why he is my entry point, and apply it in a new context, namely modern technologies. And not only in naive technology, naive or romantic windmill type of technologies, like Heidegger did, for instance. So that is why I think it is not a problem to use a theory from an old theory in the current situation. But you're right, it should then also take this new context into account. Now, I feel a little bit safe because, for instance, a famous philosopher like Peter Sloterdijk, he is not talking about biomimicry, but he is talking about homeotechnology. That means instead, he opposed it to the old-fashioned technology. There were allotechnologies, so technologies that are opposed to nature, and homeotechnology is that they are the same as nature. And then he uses examples, maybe not your example, but he uses examples like genetic modification. He argues nature runs by variation and selection. We, as scientists and technologists, we know how this structure works, and we can, for instance, in synthetic biology, we can mimic, I would say, we can mimic the way nature designs it makes its own designs in the course of evolution. So in this regard, I would say that mimicking and mimicry is something that is central in the laboratory of synthetic biologists, for instance. And in this way, you cannot say that easy that it is an old-fashioned or that it's not, I would say. Then the last point, it's a famous and good argument. Hey, what a bullshit you are talking about. Oxygen is waste. So and it's very good that you raised this point. I don't want to agree. I don't agree with the people who say that the principles of nature are a normative principle in the sense that we should follow them because they are natural. Because you're right, the nature has the tendency to run on sunlight, but it also, that doesn't mean that it is not wasting or something like that. But we can take inspiration of examples of cases of technological or natural technologies that do not produce waste, that run on sunlight for our technological design, without claiming that it's a principle that complies to the whole of nature, because you're right, there are many pollutions, there is survival of the fittest in nature as well. So we shouldn't have a romantic view on nature in this regard. And it's maybe I was not clear about that, but thanks to your question, I can add this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent.